I think everyone here knows, heard more than once, that Bob Teitel is a Hollywood producer. He runs State Street Productions. He's the creative force behind The Hate to Give and any number of other films that you've heard about. We're going to do something a little special tonight. I'm going to ask some questions. You're going to ask questions and disperse throughout. And we're also going to splice in some film as we go along. Will this work without a run-through? Who knows? Let's see. Let's go. So, Bob Teitel, let's give it a one. I do have to say that in the years of doing Skeptics, the great divide in terms of who comes here, for me, very simple. Easy, hard. This guy is easy and a great guy to be around. Just wait till you get to know him. He'll stay here till 12 tonight if you want. Anyway, thank you. Bob.
Yes.
Many of these young people always want to know how someone gets from high school and does well out there in the professional world. You were a Chicago kid. It wasn't in the cards that you'd wind up as a Hollywood producer. What do you see as the key moments in your life or the key forces that led you there?
Well, it's kind of funny for me. Like in high school, I knew I loved movies. I didn't know what I would do in them, but I loved seeing them. My father would take me every Sunday. I would ditch school a couple times to go see a movie. And even when I was 14 years old, they were shooting a movie called Breakfast Club, which most people don't know. But I was 14 years old and I rode my bike like 7 miles to that set. And I stayed there all day and sat outside. And the great thing about the irony about that is some of the people who actually worked on that movie worked with me later on, years later. So I was kind of like this kid in Chicago and falling in love with movies, didn't know what I wanted to do. But I knew like in college I wanted to go to a film program and kind of figure out what I was going to do. And I had a different kind of drive too, as my father owned an auto body shop in Chicago. And I painted cars my whole life and I hated it. And I wasn't good at it. And believe it or not, that drove me to like, I gotta do this because if I don't do this, I'm stuck doing this. And believe it or not, that little thing and that hard work and learning that at a young age kind of drove me to work even harder to pursue film.
How about a question from the audience on this topic of how one gets, yeah.
I was going to say, could you explain the work of a producer?
That question I get asked all the time, and it changes every day, honestly. Every movie's different, right? But you kind of oversee the movie. Like, a lot of times you come up with the idea of the movie, you hire the director, you hire the actors, you find the money for the movie, and then when you're physically making the movie, you're in charge of around 200, 250 people, sometimes more, and you're just kind of overseeing everything. And when you're doing it really well, no one knows you're there. And that's kind of like the key to the success. Just be calm, learn the situation, and I've been fortunate enough to shoot 9 movies back home in Chicago. So I work with a lot of the same people I've worked with for years, and it's like a family. And then I worked in Atlanta and New York a couple times. So every movie's different, but a lot of times like you come up with these stories, you find the book. You know, every movie is quite different. With The Hate You Give, I know you guys saw the trailer. Hope a lot of you had a chance to read the book. That was a great story. We read the book a year before the movie came out. I mean, a year before the book came out, that is. So this young girl who was 24 years old, worked in Jackson, Mississippi at a church. She was an assistant to a pastor. And she answered an ad saying, we're looking for YA novels, young adult novels. And she responded back and said, listen, I want to do something in the world of Black Lives Matter. Would you be interested? And they're like, yeah, send me a book when you're done, right? So the first book she ever wrote went to HarperCollins. Like, they instantly swooped it up. And then we were fortunate to read the galley of the book, and every studio in town was chasing it. We were fortunate enough to do it at Fox, and we kind of bought the book. And then a year later, we were shooting a movie, which never happens that fast. Some projects I work on for years on end, some happen rather quickly. Working on a movie now this been going on 17 years. I don't think I'm ever going to see the light of day. I like it too much, so I just want to keep trying to get it done.
Bob, was there a particular mentor that helped you along the way who was memorable? And also, I know that you work with George Tillman all the time. Is it unique in Hollywood to have that kind of relationship over a long period of time and work together side by side, movie after movie?
Yes, I have a business partner who we met in college, and we've been partners for over 30 years now. And he directs and I produce. And you were fortunate to kind of find each other in college, like the same kind of movies, had the same work ethic. And when we were in Chicago, we were doing like every hip-hop music video. We were doing shorts, we were just constantly trying to get a camera from school and going out and shooting things. And we've been together like ever since. And we have a good thing, you know, we're like brothers. You want to hug him, you want to kill him, it's like every day is different, but it's a great relationship. And that's very rare in any business, especially Hollywood, it's really rare.
Okay, I think it's time to see the first clip. Maybe you want to say a word about it.
This is one of the films I did called Barbershop, and it was fortunate enough to spawn like 4 movies. But the interesting thing about this movie, it all kind of stemmed from personal experiences where I took working for my father when I was young, and I kind of incorporated that into the movie where Ice Cube's character is given the shot by his father, and he doesn't want the shot. And he doesn't realize the value of it. And I kind of took a lot of that from me and my father working, which was interesting because as soon as I went to California, my father had the shop for 24 years, and I drove to California with George, my partner, and he sold it a month later, after 24 years. It was his way of saying, don't screw up, kid, you got nothing to come back to, you got to make this work. So a lot of that was incorporated kind of into this movie. So,
does a series like Barbershop, which was successful, does it allow you to do other films that are a little perhaps edgier or more difficult to sell? Or
they kind of always come to me now, like, what's the barbershop in the grocery store? So they kind of come to you with the same kind of things, but this movie had a lot of heart to it. So even though it's a comedy, a lot of our movies have a lot of heart, and I think that's kind of the key.
Just another day on the south side of Chicago.
All right, now listen up. Give me one and your jewel won't be no problem. Hey, get your little boys along. Sit down.
It became an extraordinary day at the barber shop.
I need a cut. Look off the top, on the back, but not quite no shag. Slope to the left like Gumby. Eddie Monster in front, little white cliff on the right. Come on, hook that up front.
From MGM Pictures and the producers of Soul Food and Men of Honor.
What you doing? Hey. My finger! You wanna know how I really feel about you? Just think about that baby face song.
Which one?
You ain't that better. It wouldn't. All of them, baby. If you don't pay the property taxes, the bank is gonna foreclose on the shop. I made your father the same offer, but you're a better businessman. You got his.
How could you sell this place?
You know we're trying to get our recording studio off the ground.
You can't give this up.
Ice Cube.
Your father wouldn't put up with this mess. Do I look like my father? Yeah, you do, man.
Pretty much, I don't know.
Anthony Anderson. Sean Patrick Thomas. Eve. And Cedric the Entertainer.
Yo, Daddy, he believed that something as simple as a little haircut could change where a man felt on the inside.
Sometimes
Ladies,
finding the strength
get out.
to do what's right.
Here go your money back. I'm putting it right here on the table. Man, you're gonna take this money. You're gonna take this money.
It's in the people
We can't talk straight in the barbershop. Then where can we talk straight?
right beside you.
Rodney King should have got beat for driving drunk and being thrown in a Honda.
Barbershop.
Get you good.
Hey, y'all, look at this lady. Damn! Man, what kind of car is it, man? Camry. Oh, man, that's a good car. I got one of them. I just bought one. See, this smooth. When he get through, his face gonna be real smooth, like Gary Coleman.
how about a question from the audience? Anything?
or is it in a contract at the beginning, or?
That'd be nice, but unfortunately it doesn't work like that. You kind of get a salary up front, and if the movie is successful, hopefully we get to see some money in the back end. But it's Hollywood County, so it's really hard for that to kind of happen a lot of times. But it varies, every movie varies. Some movies are independent, you raise the money, and you're kind of like, participant in the film, if it does well. So it varies from movie to movie.
How did your upbringing in Chicago help you produce movies that tell stories in cities like Barbershop?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. Being from Chicago, I feel like in my business, you gotta have a niche, right? Like you kind of find that thing if you're like in the horror movies, you direct horror movies, produce horror movies. So for me, it was that Chicago niche, and we were those guys that were making movies back in Chicago, and no one was doing it after a long period of time. So we kept going back, and then a lot of stories kind of came our way. And I obviously have a huge fondness for the city, but I just think that being in the center of the country has a perspective that everybody can kind of relate to. It's not New York, it's not LA, so it's very relatable. And throughout the years, I've seen the city grow. I've seen good things with Chicago, and unfortunately, there's some bad things. And try to incorporate that. Like even on the third installment of Barbershop, it was more about what was going on in the city and the violence, and it was 16 years after the second one, so it felt like you had to go back. And then the great thing about Barbershop was President Obama lived about a mile from where we shot the movie, so we kind of incorporated that. And he actually visited the set when he was an Illinois senator. He was fascinated by the movies, and he came to the set and brought his kids, or his oldest daughter. And we passed the tax incentive in Chicago about giving rebate back to movies, so he was a big part of that in 2002, when nobody kind of knew who he was. So it's fascinating getting to know him and watching his rise. So Chicago has so many interesting people that we always try to kind of incorporate that into the film.
Did you ever have a moment when you were just ready to give up on what you were doing?
Yesterday. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, but the great thing about it is, that's a great question. Like, have you ever had that moment of feel like give it up? It's really hard, but if you love it, it's fine. I mean, that's the one thing I can tell people and share. It's not so unfortunate to do what I do, not because it's movies. It's unfortunate to do what I do because I love what I do. And you go through a lot of ups and downs. It's the entertainment industry, so you got to kind of learn how to ride the waves. And there's movies that I do that, like I thought The Hatred Kid, I thought I was going to get an Oscar. I thought the movie was going to make a ton of money. It didn't really make a lot of money. It was highly acclaimed, but it didn't get an Oscar nomination, and we were campaigning for it. So, but then you look back and you're like, wow, you made a piece of art, you got to show it to a lot of people, and hopefully it affects a lot of people. But there's been times when, you're at the highest moments and the lowest lows. But if you love what you do, you know how to ride those waves.
How much would you think you influence the screenplay of the movie? Because a lot of times the Barbershop's a comedy, right? It's usually the screenplay that sort of decides how it is. How do you think you influence the screenplay of the movie?
It's interesting. As a producer, you do get a chance to influence a script because you're sitting there, maybe working on it for a couple of years prior to shooting. You're working with the writer closely. We did the movie Notorious about the rapper Biggie Smalls, and learning about his life and going through that situation. We had to have a lot of influence. But one of the films that I did that we had a ton of influence was called Men of Honor. It was with Robert Teitel P’23 and Cuba Gooding about the first African American Navy diver, and his name's Carl Bashir. He was a great, great man, and we got to spend so much time with him. And when we read the script, he kept telling us story after stories, and we're like, why isn't this in the script? This has to be in the script, and it was incorporated, so we got to shape that movie. Sometimes, when I did a movie, South Side with You, about Barack and Michelle's first date, and we really didn't have a lot of influence because I was taking off a newspaper article that the writer-director wrote to kind of obviously imagine what it would have been like based off the encounters they went through that day. So that was a particular one where we didn't. But a lot of films you do as a producer have a lot of influence. Then like I said, with Barbershop, you always incorporate what you know and your personal stories. That's what, when you get a chance, that will make a great movie, when you kind of get to infuse those personal stories and you make it relatable, because it's relatable to everybody else too.
Perhaps introduce the next one. Let's see another clip, and we'll get back to questions.
My name is Master Chief Billy Sutton, and I am God. A man who won't give up. Reporting for diving school. Go wear what you wish for. And a man who won't back down. You think you're better than me? You damn right I am. Are about to test. We got unknown contact, probable Russian submarine. The limits of survival. Look at the man down there. Stay fast. And the depths of courage. Robert De Niro. What makes you try so hard? Cuba Gooding Jr. Because they said I couldn't have it. Man of Honor. Rated R. Friday only in theaters.
I was just wondering, like, how long does it actually take to, like, make one of these movies? And what, like, how much time does it take?
That's a great question. How long does it take to make a movie? Every movie's, that was the longest one I ever made. That was 80 days of shooting. And the last 20 days was in a tank. So it was all diving scenes of underwater. But usually the movies that I do are around 35 to 40 days, but that was 80 days. And then to prep a movie, to, you know, when you're like, you have 100 people in the office getting ready, that's 8 to 10 weeks. Then when you shoot the movie, it can vary from 40 days to 80 days. And then when you're in post and you're editing the movie, that's around 20, 25 weeks. So it's a long process. And no one tells you the stories about how long it took to actually get to the point where you're prepping the movie. And that's where, I mean, people work on things for years and years on end. And my job is to learn when to let go, when to push forward. And I'm still learning and still figuring it all out. But it's a long process.
Did you receive feedback from Navy officers or other divers, people in the service, about this film?
Yeah, that was an amazing experience. I mean, because I was so young. And to work with like Robert De Niro was like playing basketball with Michael Jordan. And it was like, that's all you want as a kid watching these movies. And the great thing about the movie is when we were going around to like the Pentagon, we were going to all these different, you know, formal Washington, D.C. Establishments and talking to other officers and getting the Navy to sign off. And his story within the Navy was so well known. But it didn't, you know, paint the Navy in quite a fine light. So we had to get them to sign off. But because they loved Carl and what he did, no one could really say no to this guy. And the final kicker with that film was probably, like, for me, one of the greatest days was we got to play the movie at the White House for Bill Clinton, one of his last screenings. He had the last screening he did at the White House. So that was like, it was just topped it all off. So it was amazing, you know what I mean? You don't get those experiences. That's only once in a great while. But to make that movie and be on a Navy ship, and you know, we dove into suits ourselves, you know what I mean? And we all did. And just being immersed in that world was a phenomenal experience.
Maybe one up top here and then down here.
That's a great question. How do you get a movie, like from the conception of the idea? So a lot of times you'll find a book, a magazine article, a story that you come up with on your own, and then you find a screenwriter to kind of put those words on the paper. And 95% of the time, the script never turns out the way you want it to, right? So after that individual, he or she writes that script, you spend time finessing it, getting it to where you want it. And it's all subjective, right? So you've got people, and when you get too many people giving ideas, that's when it goes astray. You know, I'm working on a movie now at Universal, and the script is horrible, and it's really bad. And it's like, we've had 6 writers like working on it, and so many different point of view, right? It started out where the guy's calm, now it's J-Lo, now it's back to a guy. I mean, it's like, it's terrible, right? But when you get too many cooks in the kitchen, people come up with all these ideas. So in a perfect organic way is you have one writer, and that writer sticks with the process, and to kind of put it on, you know, on paper, and then once it's in the script format and you're really happy with it, then it's like my job to either go find the actors, to find the director, to find the money to put it together. And that could be various different things, from going to a movie studio, to going independently to find the money, or to go into those actors directly, or going through their agents. So it's a process.
Thank you.
How about Ryan?
Two questions. One is, who are the three actors that you would love to work with in a film? Your three favorite movies of all time, and maybe just a little commentary on the way that Netflix has sort of democratized. I assume filmmaking, moved from big studios to Netflix. Similar way the music industry is sort of transformed with.
Yeah. It's a great question. Well, my three favorite movies, they change a lot, but the standards like Goodfellas is that comes on TV. I watch it constantly. There's a movie called Cinema Paradiso that I just truly adore. It's about a little kid falling in love with movies for obvious reasons. And I like the movie Road Warrior. For some reason, that movie really, I just felt, my dad took us to the movies and he sat through it 3 times. And I just couldn't get enough of it. It was just this world that was crazy. And on the actor front, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of great people from different, I think the 3 people I work with that I respect kind of the most is Robert De Niro, just because he's, I think, the greatest of all times. Maybe not the last 5 years, but prior to that, he's the greatest of all time. And I think Ice Cube's one of the smartest people I ever worked with. He knows exactly what he's doing, doesn't have to get the laughs, but he knows how to be like the wingman to everybody else, so I respect that. And I did a movie that didn't turn out so well. It's called Faster with Dwayne The Rock Johnson. And just watching that guy's work ethic and the fun he has and the respect he has for people around him, he's got an athlete's mentality. So he's he gets up before the morning to exercise, he knows everybody's name on the crew, he's joking around, and just his energy is infectious. And on the Netflix question, I get that all the time. I made 2 movies for Netflix, and they were great processes. First one it was called Mudbound, and we were executive producers on it, so we didn't have a lot of say-so. And then the movie I just did for Netflix was called Beats, and it came out this past summer. That was shot in Chicago. And that was an idea I had, that I created the idea on my own. And the experience was great, but just like you said, it was funny when I was talking to my son Hayden. It was he goes, "Where's this movie coming out?" I said, "Oh, it's going to be on Netflix." And the first thing he said is, "Great, now all my friends will see it." Right? And that little thing just rang so true to me, because it came in the theaters, not that many people could see it. So, being 51 years old, I embrace, a lot of people in my generation don't embrace it. I thoroughly embrace it because I see what happens in the music industry. If you look at the music industry, if you told them that there's no more record stores, they don't sell records, they're giving away music for free, people would think you're crazy. So, in the way movies are, so the question I get now in the industry is this movie a streaming movie, or is this movie a theatrical movie? So that's the question we get, and that kind of determines how you position the film. And that's only as of recently.
How about one question from up there, and then we're going to try another clip. Yeah.
Have you learned about the world limit in the movies that you produce?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yell it out, please.
What have you learned about the world limit in the movies that you produce?
That's a great question. What have I learned about the world of the movies I produce? I've learned a lot. I've got to meet a lot of interesting people, throughout the course of time. I think, I kind of think of the last movie, The Hate You Give, and the social impact it had. And to me, that movie was giving a voice to a subject matter that people are afraid to talk about. And it was really about this young girl finding her voice. And to me, that's a message that rings through everything you do. And what I learned too is the movie, like I said, was very highly regarded, but no one went to the movies to see it because I don't think people really want to, it's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable to watch, it's uncomfortable to talk about, but we need movies like that, so we do talk about it, and you do get to bring up subject matters like that. So when I get to do something like that, you know, for that brief moment in time, I feel like I'm doing the right thing, and I could talk about that movie forever and what I've learned from it, and, you know, but people are really uncomfortable, like they get truly uncomfortable talking about it. A lot of people saw it when it came to DVD or when it went out TV, but nobody went to the theaters to see it, and it taught me a lesson too, that, like if a movie like that goes back to, like if that movie was streaming, that would have, you know, 10 times the people would have saw it. So that's one of those situations where people feel more comfortable at home watching that than when you go out to the theater. That's a great question.
Let's roll another clip, please.
Where you want to be 10 years from now?
10 years from now, what do I want to be? I want to be just living, man. Just living comfortably with my wife, just laid back, just chilling, you know what I'm saying? Living. Where I think I'd be 10 years, I don't think I'm going to see it, dog, for real, man. I don't think my record's that good. I hope it is, but if it ain't, so be it. I'm ready.
Any questions about it? Yeah?
How do you feel like telling the story of D.I.G.? Like in the process of making the movie, like, did you have to like discuss like the situations that he went through with, you know, these celebrities in real life?
Yeah, like when we were doing the movie Notorious, obviously, he died, maybe he was murdered 15 years prior to us shooting the movie, and his mom was with us all the time, right? And here you are talking about her son getting murdered, you know what I mean? And she's right there, so it was a little uncomfortable, quite frankly. And there's a lot of people in his life, and everybody's got their own kind of take on who he was, and everybody has an opinion. So it was hard. I mean, that movie was so hard, just because of that reason alone. You know, and people are still alive, talking about him, and everybody wants to be portrayed in a certain kind of light. So it was definitely a challenge. But having his mom around was quite interesting, you know. I remember when we were casting the movie, like, who's going to play this iconic figure, right? And we go to this church in Brooklyn, like, for an open call. And we're sitting there, and it was like 4 hours, I think, and I was like, boy, this is a waste of time. We should never do this, right? And this guy comes in, and his mother, you know, Miss Walls is right over there, she goes, that's my son. I was like, what are you talking about, who? And she got that kid who walked in the door. And he looked like him, he was a rapper, but he couldn't act, right? So I was like, okay, what am I gonna do? Like, this woman said this is her son, I can't tell her this is not her son, right? So it was tricky, right? So we put that guy in a boot camp, and we beat him up for like 5 months, man. We beat him up so bad. We made him go to his acting classes, then he went to a rap class, and then Notorious, Chris Wallace had asthma, so he had this kind of lisp when he rapped, and he had to kind of get that down, and then he sang on the track. So we put this guy through so much, and really, like, you know, fully took on the character. And even after the movie was done, I think he took on the character. Like, he really thought he was being small. And he would tour around the world singing his music, making a lot of money. I mean, it's bizarre. And then he would start to act like him, you know what I mean? I tried to help him out, tried to get him to do other movies, but he was just caught up. He just got so caught up. It was a lot of stuff.
when you're like producing, let's say you want to start a movie, would you rather take like already renowned oral actor like maybe like Mark Wahlberg, for example, or would you rather take like a person that you haven't heard of, but he's really good at the role?
That's a great question. Like, would you rather take someone who's a well-known actor or someone who's not known? It kind of depends on the situation, right? You're doing like a smaller movie, you kind of want to give someone a chance, and if they're really good, they stand out. But then on the commercial side of things, you know, if you can get a big actor with a big name, maybe more people will see the movie. So it's kind of like this give and take. But the way it really, really works, no one will really tell you this, is if you get one big actress or actor, then you have the luxury for the other parts to kind of hire people that are not so known. So it's definitely a balance, but it's trying to find that balance. And, you know, there's a movie like Moonlight, right? Amazing movie, like nobody knew those actors, right? The movie was so great. And then these actors, you know, that kid won the Emmy last night from Moonlight. So there's stories like that that happen all the time. I think as a producer, deep down inside, that's kind of what you want to do. You want to break these people, you know, because you really see them do that.
With Emmys and like award show nominations, how do you feel about that process? Do you feel like the shows that win those awards are the best, or how do you feel as a producer? Do you feel it's...
I mean, if I would have won one of these awards, I'd So I truly want to win one. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, I've been joking with kids all the time. Like, I really want to win an Oscar someday. And I thought I got close a couple times, but not really that close. But those shows are terrible. They're so boring. Now, like I said, if I won one, I probably wouldn't say that. But the truth American shows are terrible. Like the Emmys, I was reading today, is the lowest rated Emmys in history. You know what I mean? And the Oscars, I'm part of the Academy, and very fortunate to be part of the Academy. And I go to these meetings, and they're figuring out what can we do this year to do something different, right? What are we going to do? Because the viewership drops down every year. And if you notice, like the Emmys this year and the Oscars this year, there was no host. I mean, they're so bad. They really don't know what to do, right? They're running out of things to do. So now they're going to have a host hosting them, thinking that's going to move it faster. Those shows, you know, continuously drop down in attendance.
Other questions? Yeah. Right.
So when you see the movies like the multimedia that have really deep like messages and you're trying to relay those to people, how do you like stay grounded and make sure you don't lose like the heart of it when like it starts to get big?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like with something like What You Give, I mean, you kind of, when we were making a movie, you really knew you were doing something special, and everybody around you felt like that. And that girl, Amanda Lestender, played the lead. I mean, God bless her, that girl. I mean, she had to cry and laugh and then cry, like every day. Like this girl went through so much. And I was just like, trying to be with her a lot, like, you all right? Like, how do we get through this? And then when we shot that scene where, you know, best friend is killed, like, people were just, you knew what was going to happen, you knew what we were doing, but people were still crying. Like, on set, people were quiet, it was the middle of a Friday night, it's like 4 in the morning, you know, you're exhausted, but then you're like emotionally charged, and no one kind of said a word and gave her space. So it kind of goes to this thing, right? Like, no one sets out to make a bad movie. They turn out bad, right? I've done a couple that I don't watch, right? Or never will watch. But I knew I was making a movie, so it turned out. That happens. But your intention is obviously to go out and make a great movie. But when you're doing something like The Hate You Give, and I had a great group of actors with me, so I knew it was going to be special. Like, they all came aboard to do the right thing, to tell this girl's story. So it was definitely interesting.
When you're making one of those bad movies,
Let's-
and you realize it, can you talk about it with other people who are involved, or everyone just kind of bites their lip, it's like, this ain't any good?
I'm really cool about it. Like, I am really good to say, like, Barbershop 2 was terrible, and Beauty Shop was terrible. Like, I'm fine, dude. Like, I think the majority of my movies are good, but there are some movies that are not so good, and, you know, you're kind of out there in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night, and you're doing something, and you think it's good, but deep down inside, like, man, this is not turning out the way I thought it was going to turn out. I did a movie that Billy Bob Thornton wrote, and you know, he's one of the most amazing actors, writers, And it was amazing, right? He gives me the script. He goes, hey, Bobby, I want you to produce this movie. And I read the script, and I hated it, right? But I'm like, it's Billy Bob Thornton, it's Robert Duvall, John Hurt, Kevin Bacon, like all these amazing actors, right? And like, who am I to turn this down? And he's a great guy, and I had a lot of fun with him. So he wanted to produce this movie, right? So there was this, and I just didn't like this, you know? I didn't get the script from the jump. We're shooting a scene outside. It was Billy Bob Thornton, Robert Duvall, who most of you know was an Oscar winner, Godfather, and John Hurt, who won an Oscar for The Elephant Man. So it's 3 Oscar-winning guys, and they're all on this porch. And I'm watching this, where it's the middle of the night, we're in Georgia, like, it looked like Gone with the Wind kind of house. And I'm sitting there watching, like, oh my God, I'm going to win an Oscar. That's all I was thinking, right? I'm watching this scene, I'm looking up there, I'm like, I'm an idiot. The script was great, right? This thing is so good, look at these 3. It's like an amazing scene. I'm sitting there like, oh my God, I'm literally thinking this, right? I'm watching this thing go on. And then when the movie was done, I watched the movie, and my gut was right. It just didn't turn out the way you thought, but you get caught up, and there's these amazing actors. Billy's a genius writer, genius director. So to watch these things happen and transpire, your intentions are always right going into it. You know what I mean? I've learned a lot. You know what I mean? Go with your gut is what I've learned most.
Let's try another clip.
There's heat. Hey, Chicago, what are you doing?
Michelle thought it wasn't a date. It isn't. Going to an awful lot of trouble for just another smooth-talking brother. He's a summer associate I told y'all about, the one from Harvard Law. He invited me to a community event.
So what's this boy's name?
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama.
Hello. You're late.
I was hoping you wouldn't notice.
I expected it. You were late for your first day of work.
You noticed that too.
I'm your advisor. I'm supposed to notice.
Well, Michelle, all set?
Shouldn't we be getting to the meeting?
We have some time. I thought we'd swing by the art center, see some paintings, maybe grab a bite to eat.
This is not a date. How's it gonna look if I start dating the first cute black guy who walks through the firm's doors? It would be tacky.
You think I'm cute?
I didn't say that. So why did you come to Chicago?
To try and make a difference.
Thought I would too. Maybe I'd help women, empower them.
You and I share a lot of the same interests.
That's sweet of you, but I'm an ice cream kind of girl.
Who doesn't like pie?
This Barack's woman, Michelle. Finally, a sister. We're not together. Pretty good setting to bring a girl surrounded by people who adore you.
We gotta stop thinking the dope is the end of the line. You flipped those letters around, you did an entirely different word. On. As in carry on.
And an inspirational speech that had everybody in awe.
Say it with me now. They say no, we say.
It's been a while since I've had that kind of connection to real life struggle. Just want to do more.
Yeah, so do I. I wonder if I could write books or hold a position of influence in civil rights.
Politics.
Maybe.
You want some?
Sure.
Think you're real smooth, don't you?
And real cute.
I mean, they did look good on Dumbo. Or Marcel.
That was a great experience, you know. We shot that movie in 16 days, like, compared to 80 on one and 16 on the other. And it was those 2 people in every scene, so it was based off a New York Times article where they talked about their first date. So we kind of recreated and figured out what they would say, what they would talk about, and went to the actual places. Some of them were real, some of them were not, but we went to the actual real places in Chicago and tried to make it feel period. And like I said earlier, I got to know the president, so I got word to him. Like, I didn't want to just go do this thing without him knowing, right? So to a friend, I talked to him, and he got back to me, he said, just don't have title and embarrass us. That was the word I got. And he goes, if it's good or not good, I can't promote it, but, just don't embarrass me. So that was the word we got back, and it was a cute little movie. Definitely a good first date movie.
I was going to say, what advice would you give to high school students who want to break into the film and
That's it.
TV
Yeah.
industry?
What advice I give to high school kids? I mean, listen, you guys have cameras on your phone, right? I think you guys go shoot a movie tonight if you want. Like, we didn't have that luxury, right? And the first things you guys do are not going to be good. It's just a fact. They're not going to be good. But you keep doing it. You keep working at it. They're going to get better and better and better. The technology today is there. It's just like going out and doing it. But going back to that, most importantly, it's telling personal stories. I think the best movies, the best stories are all based on personal stuff. If you bring in your personal story to it, people can relate to it, and I think that's what always kind of shines through. But like the technology is there for people to go. We didn't have that luxury, right? So today you have that luxury to kind of go out and shoot whatever you can do.
Okay, so there's like so many trailers for one movie. Do you ever look at one of the trailers and go, this is not described as movie at all? Why is it not?
It's usually when the trailer's so good, the movie's not that good. That's kind of like the ratio. But yeah, there are a lot of times where like you're getting a misdirection, and you go out and you watch this trailer, and you go see the movie, there's nothing like that trailer. You definitely try not to do it, but when a movie's not good, and that trailer's really good, that's a sign that movie's not good. So it's always kind of seems to work hand in hand.
How would you describe life on a set, like when you're filming a movie?
That's a great question. I mean, it's funny. People think that this job is glamorous. It is the furthest from glamour in the world. You are going out for, no less than 12 hours to 15, 16 hours per day, 5 days a week. And you gotta love it, right? It kind of look like we're like traveling carnies, like we're in a circus, right? The circus comes to town, pop up the tents, everybody comes in, everybody works, and then you leave them that night, you know what I mean? And everybody packs up all the equipment, 200 people disperse. It's like that. I mean, you really gotta love that to sit there for 16 hours a day in the cold or heat, and the crew's working hard, and everybody's kind of busting their butt to get it done. And like I said, I know I said this too many times, if you love it, it's the greatest. But it's definitely not for everybody, Some people are writers and they don't go on set and they like to do that, right? Some people are executives in Hollywood and they get to work on movies from afar, but they're not on set. For me personally, I love those long hours. I like being outside. I love being around people. I enjoy that much more than kind of being in an office. But most people do not like what I do. People like my age and older, they'd rather stay in the office and not go out. I mean, I get it, right? There's times you're out there and you're like, what did I do? Like, I should have studied in school. Like, what am I doing? It's the longest day ever. But you love it, it's the best.
Bob, I had a question. Two questions. What is a lover of Chicago living in Hollywood? How does it feel to live in California? And a harder question, the same Chicago boy, what is it like to see your city, which seems to be an outlier in terms of those urban areas that have improved a great deal in the area of violence? What is it like to see your city in turmoil? Do you have any solution? What's the be?
Listen, I'm really close to a lot of people in that city and from different factions of life, and my heart goes out to that city, and it's so sad on so many levels that the majority of this crime is happening in one section of the city, and it's sad to see, right? And everybody has, what are you going to do to fix this? What can a mayor do to fix this? And it all comes down to hope for me. Like people have to have hope. They have to feel like a being of substance. They have to feel like they have an objective. They got to feel like there's people that care about them. And unfortunately, in those neighborhoods, there's a lack of hope. And anything to do sometimes to bring that back, like when we were shooting this movie, Beats, which is, I told you, it came out on Netflix. It's about a kid in Chicago. you'll see the movie, the kid has PTSD, but through music, he kind of gets out. He has PTSD because he saw his sister get killed in front of his eyes. And then you cut to a couple years later, and the kid's never left his house. But during that time, he produces music, right? So while we were shooting that film, it was 3 different times in a 25-day period where gunshots rang out within a half a block of the set, right? And everybody dispersed, and then the next day we had more security, and we thought it got better, and a couple of days later, the same thing happened, and someone was a half a block away laying in the street, bleeding out. I mean, it was crazy, right? And this was my 9th movie I shot in Chicago, and I'd never experienced that before. And I know what's going on in that city. I'm very keen on what's going on. I'm very aware of what's going on. And I'm fortunate enough not to live in that area, quite frankly, but I saw it. My version of that, seeing that, it was quite sad. It was really sad to see. But there's a lot of beauty in that city, too. There's a lot of beauty in those neighborhoods. That's why I think you have to try to find that balance. And Chicago gets pinned, there's a lot of other cities that have worse crime, but Chicago always kind of gets targeted as that city.
Do you feel like you've accomplished something telling the stories of urban communities in your movies?
That's a great question. Sometimes I feel it. I still sometimes look back on it and I'm trying to, grasp it all, but I think we've been fortunate enough to tell a lot of stories in those urban environments, and hopefully they get across and give some people hope and give some people encouragement. And, I think the greatest thing is when you're working in these neighborhoods, kids get to see all these different people working together from different races and religions, and everybody's like this one group. And I think when you do stuff and you're authentic and you shoot in those neighborhoods, that's like the greatest gift you can give. And we'll hire a lot of kids in the neighborhood, we'll hire a lot of people from the neighborhood. So I always feel like that's my way of giving back. I think I gave a lot of people like their first job and doing something like that. So that always makes me feel good when I look back on it.
About the last clip and a question or two, and it's a wrap. And if you want to come up afterward, that's fine. It's about 8 o'clock.
The only clip is the 8, yeah, which you already showed.
Want to see a little part of that? How long is it, this clip?
I think it's 30 seconds.
30 seconds of an 8 give reminder. Quite a film.
Father, thank you for allowing us to shine today.
Thank you for my family.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to shine today.
Thank you for my family. That's what I was gonna say. My name is Star, Garden Heights. Mama and Daddy says our life is here because our people are here. The high school is where you go to get jumped. We don't go there. At Williamson, I'm Star version 2 until the weekend comes around. What's up? Star, you okay?
Khalil gone and you still here. Trying to make some sense out of it.
You was there, so you gotta tell everybody what happened. You can anybody else know. There's an unnamed witness who will be called to testify in front of the grand jury. I don't know how long I'm gonna start as a witness. It's like I have to hide who I am every single day. If I don't speak out, what kind of friend is that?
You can break the cycle. Not everybody got superpowers like you. Shine your light. I ain't naming you Star by accident. PG-13.
Any last questions? Mark? Moment? Anything about it? Yeah?
Looking back, if you could tell your yourself in high school, anything, 1 thing, 2 things, what would you say?
I'm sorry, what high school?
If you could go back and tell yourself in high school something, what would it be?
That's a great question. What would I tell myself in high school? Talk to girls. That's the first thing that came to mind. No, it's funny. I just loved movies back then, and I kept watching movies, and I was just obsessed with it. And I think if I could look back on it, it was just really enjoy my time and pursue it. I wish I pursued it even earlier. I wish I would have made, personally, I wish I would have made some movies and did some experiences where I grew up back then in that time. It's something I wish I would have done.
The last question there, yeah?
What was the hardest part about filming?
The hardest part about filming Hate You Give? It It was that scene when he was shot, that was like brutal. Like, he knew what was gonna happen, and I think it was day like 20-something of 40. And you just didn't want to, it was on a Friday night, and everybody knew what was coming, and you just kind of anticipated it, and Manila was ready, and Algie, who played, he got shot. I mean, everybody was just so emotional that time. But even, like I said, you knew it was coming, it was still got you every single time. That was extremely hard.
Yeah, I had two ones. One, I guess one's a fairly easy one, one's a hard one. One would be like, if you knew you'd never sniff an award and you could never find out anything about the viewership of your movies, would you keep doing this?
Yeah, hard.
And then two would be, you've been in this industry for a long time, so what are you doing actively now to make sure that this is a better, safer industry for women to work in?
That's a great question. I mean, I think the good news is that people are well aware of it, and more women, more minorities are being hired. It's still a long way to go, but I think it's going up and up and up. And it took this movement to wake people up, and it's great that it's happened. And like I said, I think the industry is nowhere near it should be, but I think the improvements are there, and more minorities and women are working. I've always kind of been keenly aware of it, even just working on, just because of the subject matters of the films that I do. So for me, it was always being Puerto Rican myself, I was always looking out for other young Latinos, and my partner being African American, and him looking out. So together we would always try to hire as many minorities as possible. And you get that question, like, why are you hiring them if they don't have the experience? Then I would say, well, no one gave them the chance, or to get that chance of experience. So if I can do that, I'm going to do that, right? And we've been keenly aware of it for years on end, so we've always brought it, we always look out in any way we can.
I think we'll end there, but of course you're welcome to speak with Bob Teitel, who's more than happy to answer your questions. Let's give him a really